Hello and welcome to Bend the Knee, a Song of Ice and Fire podcast. I am Sir Matt.
I am Sir Jimmy of House Nuts. Welcome back to our Song of Ice and Fire book club. Today we are into House of the Dragon Season 2 Iceberg territory, where we did this in the first season. You know, we took everything that we could formulate as a theory. We also went out on the internet and the deep recesses of the dark web to find some crazy theories. And it turns out some of them actually ended up maybe possibly being true, or at least leading us down to a road that where we think they could end up being true or something. So we decided that we would do another Iceberg for season 2. People seem to really enjoy it. It was, one of our most popular episodes of all time. So we figured that we would do it again here today. It goes without saying, but we just want to say full spoilers for House of the Dragon. That includes the things that have not happened yet. So Fire and Blood spoilers. So if you don't want the future of House of the Dragon spoiled in any way, you might want to come back to this after you've either read Fire and Blood or the show's over.
Yeah, 100%. Just want to say that again. Complete full spoiler territory. If you are listening to this or you are watching this, I'm sure we're still going to get comments of people saying, hey, you guys spoiled it for me. But hey, you know what? Somebody else already spoiled it for you, and we'll get to that in one of the things. So,
oh my.
Just like we did in the last one, we got some comments, especially now that video is kind of taking off. I just want to kind of reiterate just how an iceberg works, because I think for some people, this might be their first time doing it. They're like, what is this even doing? So essentially, think of it as if you're staring into the ocean. You see an iceberg, but the real question is, how deep does it go? It gets deeper and deeper. You may only see the tip of the iceberg. That's what's sticking out of the water.
That's what's obvious.
That's what's obvious. As it goes deeper and deeper, who knows how deep it goes. So the deeper we get, the more crazy the theories get, the more wild they get. And remember that some of it is actually just pointing to things that are already known. So some of it is informational. It's not necessarily a theory. Because I think in the last one I remember seeing a comment of somebody being like, theory was, but it's like tier 1. And they're just like, well, that's not surprising.
Yeah.
It's like, no joke, man. That's what's there. So
to give everyone an example, right? Tier 1 for season 1 would be that, hey, Rhaenyra's kids might be bastards. Like, obviously,
exactly.
we know that. That's informational, very obvious. That's tier 1. Tier 7, when we were at the bottom of the iceberg, we were talking about how Drogon actually is responsible for burning down King's Landing in season 8, not Dany, because it was similar with Aegon name. It was just ridiculous.
Right. Yeah. So
if you hear us utter some stuff that is preposterous, that's right. That's
exactly. And some of this is also book tie-ins too, which I will say, even going back to that House Strong thing, just to sort of give people a little bit of a comparison here, is in the books, it's just sort of speculated and theorized on that they are members of House Strong. Obviously in the show now, it's Rhaenyra's all but said it.
Yeah.
She has still yet to sort of fully commit to saying that. Anyway, here we go. We're going to go sort of back and forth here. These first two actually kind of go together, but tier 1 of the iceberg, Laenor Valeryon dies off screen. In season 1 of House of the Dragon, we see Laenor Valeryon flee to Essos after faking his death. In season 2, we see his dragon Seasmoke appear restless. Mysaria points out to Rhaenyra that perhaps Seasmoke is lonely, indicating that Laenor may have died off screen.
Yeah, this is something that we had talked about, and this went around the circles online as well, with people like reviewing the episode and stuff, and we were trying to figure out exactly, what to get out of that scene when Mysaria kind of points at it. And then obviously later in the season, we get maybe we shouldn't say confirmation, but it maybe further alludes to the fact that this is the case whenever Seasmoke is claimed. The idea being that the bond has been broken between Laenor and Seasmoke. So this one feels all but confirmed for me. I mean, in my head canon, at least, Laenor has passed on. I wonder what happened. How do you think he died?
Yeah, I don't know. It's that's
hard, face down.
Very interesting if he didn't, which will tie into the next one here too, because it's different, obviously, in the books. But just real quick before we move on to that next point, interesting and a really cool way to do it, especially since they led us to believe Laenor may come back, be an important player in this role, because in the books we just know he dies, and actually his death in the books isn't nearly as speculated upon as it would have been in the show. That people would have think Daemon did something, because a lot of the books, is bullet points. So it's these bullet points. So it does tie us into our second one here, and I'll read this one too, Jimmy. Laenor Valeryon is not Addam of Hall. So in season 2 of House of the Dragon, introduced 2 bastard sons of Corlys Valeryon, Addam and Alan of Hall. Addam of Hall even goes on to claim Sea Smoke. Now in Fire and Blood, there is some speculation as to who the fathers of these brothers is, with some suggesting could actually be bastards of Laenor Valeryon instead of Corlys. Some fans have even speculated that Addam of Hall could even be Laenor himself, since he claims the same dragon. This theory is obviously not true in the show, as we see they are 2 very different characters, but in theory could still be true in the books.
Yeah, this is one that I felt like you were pretty keen on, right, when we were going into season 2, like before we had confirmation, because it did leave a wide open door for Laenor to come back in this show. And we were thinking, well, why make that change if not to possibly bring him back? And also the actor was awesome. Like, we really enjoyed his performance, so we were kind of hoping that he would come back. Even turns out no, they are in fact 2 separate people, at least in the show canon. They are certainly not Laenor's bastards, because they are far too old for that in the show.
Yeah, the book definitely sort of also implies that they are more likely to be Corlys's, but it is interesting in the book, the idea, and I think obviously the reason that was theorized was, it's like, hold on a second, somebody comes over and is a bastard son of Corlys Valeryon, looks like Corlys Valeryon, and also claims the same dragon, so that makes it certainly more interesting. There's obviously probably another part of that bond there too, especially as we saw in this show, the way they're doing these dragon bonds, and some of the people who are claiming them are still of Targaryen blood. They probably still have a similar smell to them, like if you look at the dragon seeds of that previous rider. Like, you know, there is actually a connection if you kind of map it out, of like that previous rider to the person who gets it. And here, obviously, you know, they're both sons of Corlys Valeryon. You know,
you are kind of right. I think it might have been even more interesting if it had been Laenor, just because the historical record would show it to be two totally different individuals, when it turns out that in fact that it was the same, right? It's almost like the reverse Shakespeare theory, right? That Shakespeare's all these other different people, and in, you know, reality it's probably just one, most likely, but it's like a flip of that, which would be kind of cool. But it just goes to show that the show is a telling of Fire and Blood. Doesn't mean that it's the objective truth, so we can still speculate. That's the fun thing about even Laenor's death not happening in the show, is that now when you reread Fire and Blood, you could play around with that thought experiment, because it doesn't really impact the larger story that much.
In the book, obviously, you know, where this theory could still be true, Laenor Valeryon, the son of Corlys and, you know, Rhaenys, so he actually still has a Targaryen mother. Addam of Hall, we don't know who his mother is. They kind of hint in the show, well, maybe, you know, she was Targaryen. Or does he just get it from Corlys, who Valerians and the Targaryens and Valeryons have been intertwining their family for generations at this point too, so it is something far distant? Did Corlys himself sleep with a Targaryen, unnamed Targaryen bastard, that's what gives them not just Valeryon but also the Targaryen tie? So that is something that's kind of interesting too, is exactly who is his mother, which is why a lot of people also thought, in the books at least, that it could have been Laenor, which is what I thought was going to be the case, in disguise or you know, something, since they even played around with that Targaryen tie here as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's about a million different ways it could have went. I think this is one of the cases where, like, the most likely scenario ended up being the canon scenario for the show, again, for the show, and it all works out at the end.
Okay, Jimmy, you want to do the next one?
Yeah, I'll give it a whirl. Let's see how my dyslexia follows up with this.
Okay.
So the Greenman in season 2, episode 8 of House of the Dragon, as Daemon is approaching the Weirwood tree in Harrenhall, we see a small creature in the shadows run towards the tree. This is a Greenman in the A Song of Ice and Fire novels. The Greenmen are said to have founded after the pact between the First Men and the Children of the Forest. The Andals were unable to defeat the Order during the invasion of Westeros. The Isle of Faces is seemingly protected by strong magics wielded by the Greenmen, as anyone who attempts to land at the island is swept away by the winds. It is conjectured that there are still Children of the Forest living on the Isle, under the protection of the Greenmen. You guessed it. Some nursery tales, Old Man loves to talk about these, say that the Greenmen have horns and dark green skin. According to Old Nan, our trustworthy fairy tale expert, the green men ride elks and sometimes have antlers themselves. Most maesters believe that they are simply people wearing green clothes and a horned headdress, which seems more likely. Otherwise, there have been no confirmed sightings of the green men or recorded visits to the Isle of Faces for thousands of years. Howland Reed, though, purportedly visited the Green Men in his 16th year and stayed with them for a whole winter. He then left the Isle of Faces in 281 AC to travel to the nearby Great Tourney at Harrenhall, of course, leading to the Night of the Laughing Tree situation. And Howland Reed remains one of the biggest question marks in the main series today.
The Green Men themselves are they're really not mentioned that much, right? You have to go to they're sort of mentioned in the first little bit of the Dawn Age in World of Ice and Fire. And, even there, I have the book pulled up here. It says whether the Green Men still survive in the Isle is not clear, although there is an occasional account of some foolhardy young river lord taking the boat to the Isle and catching sight of them before winds rise up or a flock of ravens drives him away, similar to what Jimmy was saying. Mm-hmm. The nursery tales claim that they are horned and have dark green skin as a corruption of the likely truth, which is that green men wore green garments and horned headdresses. Now, in the show, we really didn't see. It was sort of, dark. We didn't get to really see whether they are tied to it or whether they are just perhaps some sort of mystical creature too. Are they just men who bred with the children of the forest? Are they chronic men? Ooh. Are they another splinter of the chronic men, right? The chronic men magic that Howland Reed has.
I kind of love
somehow he's able to go there.
I mean, I love all this because it's most likely a combination of the two, right? It's probably something that's been webbed together over time and then splintered into either this or this, but it's probably a little bit of both. Because how would Howland Reed in the 16th year just randomly be able to survive the winds and they let him come on the island? Unless maybe Howland Reed is special and that he has a role to play in the future, and the Green Men know that. But regardless, this is during a very mystical time at Harrenhall. And to see House of the Dragon leaning into the fantastical elements and a lot of the old school lore from the main series is really awesome. I mean, that's one of the things I really love about Ryan Condell and the team is that they are not shying away from the more fantastical elements of the show. Green Men are fascinating, and I would love the idea that maybe it was children of the forest and men at one point, like maybe a crossbreed of some sort. It kind of makes you, I don't know if you've ever heard this, Matt, but back in the day when there were Neanderthals, some people wonder if they were any type of mating going on, right? And there's a alternate history theory. It's not true, but it's still interesting to think about. So the Ben Elim in the Bible, the angel type people.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's giants and all this other stuff in the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
So some people believe that those Ben Elim and giants and whatever that are found in old scripture are actually crossbreeds of Neanderthal and Homo sapiens, which is fascinating.
Some people have Neanderthal DNA.
Yeah. So, I mean, most likely that did happen. But the whole Bible connection thing is kind of
right.
a loose theory. But this reminds me of that. It's okay, well, maybe there's these mystical little creatures out there called the Green Men. Well, okay, well, maybe they do exist, but maybe they're just simply few and far between or almost extinct or are extinct at this point.
Or I've often thought they could perhaps be some sort of male children of the forest, because I believe, I'd have to go, maybe I'm wrong on this, but the pictures we have in the book and the picture and what we see in Game of Thrones is we only see female children of the forest. I don't think we've ever seen a male children of the forest, have we? I mean, there might be in some of the official calendars or something, or some of that artwork or something.
Yeah, and also, clearly we saw children of the forest actually on screen in the TV show, whereas in the books we've only gotten a little bit of a taste with Bran up there with Bloodraven beyond the wall. So there's plenty of more time.
And those are children of the forest. So
yeah, those are children of the forest, not Green Men. But the question remains: are the Green Men the same thing? Are they different? Are they a spinoff? Are they all related? I mean, there's tons of questions.
Right.
But the fact that we saw one in House of the Dragon is awesome. I love
that. And the only person to go there is Howland Reed, which is what makes
it. And you know how much I love Howland Reed. So
yeah, we know. Yeah. Okay, this is a pretty controversial one. Again, still here in tier 1. Rhaena is taking Nettle's place.
Oh boy.
In Fire and Blood, Nettles, 16 years old, was able to tame the wild dragon Sheepstealer by bringing it a freshly slaughtered sheep each morning, causing Sheepstealer to become accustomed to the girl, according to Mushroom. Daemon had come to love Nettles and took her as his bedmate, despite the fact that she was an unlikely paramour for the prince, though Mushroom's claim of that is often questionable. Archmaester Gildane, just remember real quick that Fire and Blood is written by two sources, an Archmaester and Mushroom, the court jester. Gildane considers the story to be far more likely than most of his tales. Gildane further references Maester Norrin's Chronicles of Maidenpool, which recorded that the prince and his bastard girl slept in adjoining bedrooms, but that they ate together each night and morning. Norrin wrote that Daemon doted upon Nettles as a man might doted on Nettles as a man might dote upon his daughter, and described Daemon teaching Nettles common courtesies and giving her fine gifts, such as an ivory hairbrush, a silvered looking glass, a velvet and satin cloak, and leather riding boots. Norrin further wrote that Daemon showed Nettles how to wash herself properly, reported they often shared a single tub washing each other. So
Creepy.
Yes. So that is something that we've talked about on the podcast, and we've actually talked a lot about on Patreon, because I haven't wanted to talk about anything about Nettles in the show since we've been avoiding spoilers, but since we're in complete spoiler territory here today, so that is the piece that I've actually sort of thought might be interesting with Mysaria kissing Rhaenyra. Is what ends up happening is Rhaenyra hears about this and basically denounces Daemon. And that's like sort of the real fall of Rhaenyra ultimately is that now she's said, well, I don't even want you back, Daemon. Right. I'll just do this all myself. And it's because Daemon potentially has another love interest. So if they kind of, maybe they're flipping that around and they're going to do that with Rhaenyra. Yeah. But now it's kind of interesting too, because Daemon has seen all these prophecies and it seems like he's going to follow her no matter what. So kind of something interesting that they're going to play with there, and we're going to see. Regardless, it does seem like they are giving this character Nettles to Rhaena. And, if you look at it, it could be, Daemon's daughter. Other than that, deleted scene where he's hugging them, he hasn't really interacted with them that much.
Yeah, what's weird though is that I remember reading somewhere that the actress, and maybe it's Bela or Rhaena, someone can correct me in the comments or an email, that there was a reported rumor that one of the actresses said that at the end of season 2 that one of them received Dark Sister, Daemon gives it to them. And I'm wondering, how we know the season was cut from 10 to 8 episodes by the studio. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if we see that moment in the early season 3. And here's my thing. So if Nettles is going to be replaced, which I'll come back to if I think that's going to happen, if Nettles is going to be replaced, it's going to be a split, I think, between Alys Rivers and Rhaena. And I think Rhaena is going to take on more of that fatherly figure. You know what I'm talking about? The stuff that makes this kind of creepy with Nettles. I think he'll take a more fatherly role in Rhaena's life, whereas maybe possibly Alys Rivers will remain more of the love interest, and then they're going to have to change things up with Aemon. It might become a love triangle of some sorts, or not really sure exactly how it's going to go down. I was 99.9% positive that they were going to cut Nettles until I saw the Ryan Condell interview where he's basically asked point blank about Nettles, and he's non-committal about it being cut. And he's like, yeah, you're just going to have to wait and see. I'm like, well, wait and see. What are we going to wait and see for? I mean, it seems all but confirmed that Rhaena is going with Seasma, right? I mean, it seems very obvious.
Or
but
Sheepstealer, yeah.
Yeah, Sheepstealer. I'm sorry, Sheepstealer. But I don't know. Ryan Condell's interview, either he's baiting the audience, which seems like a terrible idea, or maybe we should hold out hope for Nettles. I'm not sure. But my guess is, if I had to go with my gut, she's cut, and her role would be split between Alys Rivers and Rhaena, I think.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, it's possible she could show up in season 3, and then Rhaena goes on sort of her path, which if you really go down her story, she doesn't really do a whole lot. I mean, she marries and has a bunch of kids. That's sort of her life. But I also don't think she's going to get the whole Dark Sister thing is so weird because we're in spoiler territory here. Dark Sister takes on a very specific role. Daemon.
It has another place to be.
Right. We're in spoiler territory, but even still, we're trying not to spoil it. But
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, so Daemon is going to use Dark Sister, in the future. And so what's he going to do if he gives that away? Now he's going to become this like ultra father figure. I don't know. Right. Maybe he has some more visions and he thinks that the princess who's promised or any of that stuff comes from like his line and not Rhaenyra's, and they are still going to play out this like fracture between Daemon and Rhaenyra as things go on, and maybe that will be the thing, is where he instead of beginning to favor, but he just had all these visions of Rhaenyra sitting the Iron Throne. So it's going to be interesting. They could still have Nettles, but yeah, it does seem like Rhaena's going to get it. And I mean, she goes on to have a bunch of kids and stuff. I mean, if they're just going to skip over that, like, are we ever going to come back to that story? How are they going to do that? We'll have to wait and see. Because I mean, I don't know that we'll ever see Aegon the Third at like an Aegon the Third show, and I mean, maybe at some point, but that's just not one of the big stories. Obviously we know we're getting Duncan Egg. We know we're getting Aegon's conquest inside of the Targaryen thing. There's still a lot more stuff, but Aegon the Third is not the most exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. And hey, who knows? Here's the thing. I feel like they could have made Rhaena more interesting than her role in Fire and Blood, but did they need to make it Nettle's role? Probably not. That's one of those things where it is interesting that they would choose to cut Nettles over every other character that they could have cut here. Like the Lannister character could have got cut at some point. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that is one of the reasons why I'm like, maybe we're being bamboozled. Maybe Nettles does show up in season 3. Who knows?
Yeah. And now it's difficult too to know what stuff did they move around in editing to turn this into 8 episodes. I actually saw somebody on Reddit today, actually, and they were making a good point. Is there's a shot that we didn't see in the trailer that shows Bela, and she is like on her dragon, and it's clearly burning something. And if you remember her one shot of her on the dragon when she was chasing Kristen Cole, if you actually go frame by frame, it's not the same shot. So clearly that was something that was used. Now they obviously probably didn't film those big battles, but maybe they were filming some stuff. Who knows? I mean, the whole budget thing, when you're filming, you may think, well, we might use this, we might use that, and then to piece it around. So because of the constraint of the season, it's hard to know too. Some of that stuff might have been reused and reworked into something else. The Rise of Skywalker is a very good thing to look at, where Justice League and Zack Snyder's Justice League as well. When you look at because of the studio has to come in and cut budgets and move things around, you can if you just go on YouTube, you can see people breaking down like shots and stuff like that, and see like, oh yeah, clearly that was probably meant for something. Like sometimes they're even in reverse, which is crazy. Like a lot of the stuff in Rise of Skywalker, there's actually moments where it's like if you watch it in reverse, you're like, oh, that shot makes way more sense in reverse than it does, which is wild. And then Justice League is another great one, but of course it did get the completed version, so you can actually really watch those back to back and see, oh yeah, those are really meant to be totally different movies.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder, like, if they just take random shots for promote. Like, I don't know, maybe they just have a stock file of just video. You know what I mean? Like, of things.
I'm sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Of like, hey, I need you on a dragon. We might use it for something. You never know. Yeah.
Yeah.
B-roll. 100%. Yeah. So yeah, interesting. I know a lot of people are upset about the fact that we don't have Nettles. I think we could still see her, but I would say at this point it does seem like Rhaena is going to do it. Otherwise, I don't really know what she's going to do in season 3. I mean, you could have an interesting thing where she goes to take the dragon and she can't do it, and then it's stolen from her. Remember, because Bela was going to go claim Vhagar.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
right.
Aemon took it. So now they could both potentially have that, and maybe that's the story you're going to tell. Also, if she claims sheep stealer, maybe Daemon views that as like a big deal, because sheep stealer so kind of wild, and maybe he really respects that, and maybe that's something that causes him to dote on her, like the maybe if the Nettles route of it being his daughter, not his lover.
Yeah, and Daemon is a changed man, obviously, after everything at Harrenhall and coming out of it. And location wise, it actually does make sense. Like, they're not super far from me. I mean, they're not super close either, but like they could definitely run into each other in season 3. I'm starting to think the Dark Sister comment though was a troll by the actress. I think she was just trolling us, because when I heard it, I was like, excuse me? The Dark Sister has a job to do, and it's certainly not in Rhaena or Baela's hands.
Yeah, and if you look at, if you go down Rhaena, if you go down Nettle's path, excuse me, I mean, she just kind of flies off and disappears.
Yeah.
We don't really know. Okay, next one here. Daenerys's eggs. Rhaenyra sends her sons along with Rhaena Targaryen to the Vale for safety. She also gives Rhaena 4 eggs, and director Geeta Patel confirmed these are Daenerys's dragon eggs. So at least in the show version, those are Daenerys's eggs. All of us who work on the show are big Game of Thrones fans, so it was very exciting to shoot that scene.
Yeah, so this got a little bit of flack because in the books, this probably would not be the case based on what we know about timeline, where they end up, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. We don't know that the eggs that, by the way, real quick, that the eggs that Dany gets are the ones from Sunfyre that people think is who it is, because it's like, 3 eggs, but we don't know for sure. But that seems to be the theory.
Yeah, and that's another pet character people really love, right? In the histories, people get a little upset when those people are robbed of their roles and whatnot. I can understand that. I have pet characters that I love as well, would not want to see them, like Helen Reed, for instance, who got absolutely shafted by the main series, and I never let it go. But I think this is kind of cool fan service and connection. You know, fan service is thrown around as a negative most of the time on the internet, but I always say HBO is always going to link these 2 shows together. They want you to remind you about Game of Thrones, so maybe you'll go back and rewatch it a couple times, get those streaming numbers up. It's common sense for business practice. So this is cool. I have no problems with this. Again, show canon is show canon, book canon's book canon. When I saw them, I knew that they were going to tell us that this was Dany's eggs. I knew it for a fact. As soon as I saw them, I was like, oh yeah, because they're the exact same coloring and everything. Yeah, I didn't need any confirmation, honestly. This is one of those times where the director didn't have to say anything. I think most of us watching who've watched the Thrones a couple times, we were like, okay, they're connecting these 2 things. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I think it's great. You're trying to build out that universe. You're trying to connect House of the Dragon to Game of Thrones, and they did a lot of that. I mean, they did a ton of that this season, and I mean, obviously, even that final vision that Daemon has. So I think it's good. I don't think it really hurts a character that we're probably never going to see.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, it's another point in time where it's very unlikely we see that character.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing you could have done with it is, remember, they actually were planning on some of that, like a Corlys Valeryon spinoff. He was going to get his own show because he goes on a bunch of adventures, and he actually goes to a Shy and he sees the dragon. It's Alyssa Farman, excuse me, and he believes he sees Sunchaser, her dragon, and maybe then he sees those clutch of eggs, and that's the way it seems like maybe when the Corlys thing was cut, that they were, that seems like he didn't really get that far off. They're like, yeah, we're not going to go down that.
It almost feels like a lot of Corlys' stuff has been cut, right? Like I've just seen
his entire season 2. Yeah, his entire season 2.
Him chilling.
It literally feels like he filmed all of his scenes in like 2 days. I mean, especially the shipping busy stuff.
They were like, well, we'll just throw you in here for a week. Do what you can.
All right. Well, hey, that was it for tier 1 of the Iceberg. So now we're going to go down to tier 2, and things are going to get a little deeper.
Yeah, this is pretty crazy. Okay, so this is now we're getting beneath the surface of the water. So these are things that you may know or have heard, but a little bit more unknown, but still fairly tame. So tier 2 starts off with, they have foreshadowed, they being the showrunners, have foreshadowed every character's death in House of the Dragon. House of the Dragon has foreshadowed 6 character deaths that will take place in the upcoming seasons.
So there's 6 of them, although one of them is a little iffy, but it's still a good
full thing. Spoilers, so, people. Full spoilers, and this will tie into Joffrey spoiling something. So Rhaenyra, right? That shot of her standing in front of Vermithor as we're doing in the dragon pit, as we know, Rhaenyra's downfall, killed by a dragon. I was saying, and we see her watching a fire-breathing dragon burning someone alive, and she's essentially seeing exactly where she will possibly be standing by the end of her arc, depending on whether it eats her or lights are on. Who knows what they'll do? But it feels very much like that is a scene that we were meant to take in as foreshadowing.
Daemon Targaryen, obviously, we see him at the ending of it, falling into the lake. Helena comes to him and says, "You're gonna die at the God's Eye." We know the big battle of the God's Eye. Same thing with Aemond. Helena tells this to him right then and there. You're gonna die at the God's Eye, which we know that's what should be hopefully the most epic battle in all of Westeros TV. Two guys battling on a dragon, jumping off and attacking each other with swords as well. Both of them get that. They get that foreshadowing. And a lot of the shots of Harrenhal this season also were outside of it, which, Harrenhal sits on an enormous lake, and you have the God's Eye in the middle, the island where the Greenmen hang out. There's tons of weirwood trees there. Also, by the way, that is also the lake that will be right on that lake, just at a different part in White Walls in the Dunk and Egg show.
Yeah, a lot of scenery that's going to be very important in the future. And how about shout out to Helena just out here spoiling the whole show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's much like Joffrey in Game of Thrones. We'll get to here in a minute. Kristen Cole, his isn't super specific when he's sitting on that log talking to Rhaenyra's brother, or to Alicent's brother, excuse me, and he's got the sword there. He certainly seems like knows he's heading toward death. The first one that really caught my eye was Jacaerys, Valeryon, Jace, right? Is you see that shot of Baela walk up behind him with the crossbow. Not that she's gonna shoot him, but just sort of that framing of it, since he is crossbowed down.
Yes, and that was the one that caught my attention immediately, where I was like, "Oh, I see. Maybe we need to pay attention a little bit more." And then obviously, 6 of the deaths have been foreshadowed with really nice cinematography and shots from the crew. Yeah. So pretty dope.
And the final one is Helena's, which is going to be one of the saddest ones, which I actually thought they might have. We talked about this. Man, they might move that up.
We thought so.
They might move it up, but now we know Helena's way too important to kill off early.
So, I mean, she has done a lot at this point, and being
for a character who in the books who's done like nothing.
I would not be surprised if we see her bite the bullet even mid-season 3. Yeah. I see her time coming to an end. They've gotten miles out of this character, more than what we got in Fire and Blood, and what a great performance.
Yeah, and of course her death is, she falls onto some spikes, and during that riot scene when Alicent and her are fleeing the Sept, right, she's shoved up against a wall and kind of like a door, and the door has some notches out of it, and so it almost looks like in a way that she is falling on spikes. So yeah, interesting that they have done this.
I love this stuff. I mean, this is stuff we love in the books, and this is them taking it to a visual medium, a completely different type of storytelling medium, and still doing the same things, which is great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, let's move on to the next one here, which again, this is a little more informational, but it does tie into the last one we just read, which is Joffrey spoils House of the Dragon. As if Joffrey wasn't bad enough in Game of Thrones, he goes as far to ruin and spoil the events of House of the Dragon. In episode 4 of season 3 of Game of Thrones, Joffrey tells Marjorie that Rhaenyra was eaten by her own brother's dragon right in front of her son. He then points out that that's what's left of her buried in the crypts below the Great Sept of Baelor. He doesn't offer many more details regarding the specifics of what happened or why it happened, and many viewers in the original series might have overlooked this story, especially when told by Joffrey.
Yeah, Joffrey, still a dick in every manageable way possible. This is true in the books, as is in the TV show, I believe. I'm pretty sure that the Dance of Dragons is spoiled also in the book. So it's like one of those things where you're almost getting punished for reading the main series first,
Yeah, because that's where we get a lot of the information about the histories that George expanded upon further.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting that George wrote that book back in 96, 97, 98, somewhere around there, and the fact that he had a lot of these stories in mind. It's like Eric and Eric are mentioned very early on in the series, and to know that he had that all in his brain and then he wrote it all out is, insane. I mean, it's why he's the GOAT. That's
why it's taken so long.
That's right. It's so true, though. The man probably is going mad.
All right, Jimmy, you want to take this last one here?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really good one, and I have multiple feelings about this. So, is Sunfyre dead? King Aegon II Targaryen might have survived the wounds he sustained during the Battle of Rook's Rest in House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 4, but the fate of his sweet puppy dog, of a dragon Sunfyre has been less certain. In episode 5, Sir Criston Cole ambiguously described Sunfyre as long in the dying. Several episodes later, the season 2 finale seemingly confirms that Sunfyre succumbed to his injuries. And this, I have so many thoughts about this, Matt, but I'm going to say this. I think that there is still an opportunity that Sunfyre could be alive. I, however, do not understand. So it would be a big shock value in season 3 for Sunfyre to come back, because Sunfyre has stuff to do in the series, like
as we talked about.
Yeah,
in the past 2 theories, they're all connected.
Yeah, so Sunfyre has things to do, and that makes me feel as if Sunfyre is going to be alive, and it's going to be this kind of like shock / like twist moment. I just don't. I was fine with it whenever Criston Cole said Sunfyre was long in the dying, because he had to get out there as soon as possible. He didn't see the dragon really die. He had to get Aegon back to King's Landing. But at the end, where we kind of hear that, yeah, Sunfyre succumbs to the injury, is dead. It's like, okay, now you're like going out of your way to make sure I think Sunfyre is dead to turn it back around on me later. It's just one of those times where like I feel like the showrunners are putting themselves in a bad situation. Like, because people are gonna complain. People are gonna be like, this doesn't make any sense, because who wouldn't have known that a dragon was alive? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like they're inviting criticism for this being like a nonsense twist. And it's also just not really necessary in my mind. The flip side of this, folks, is that Sunfyre might be dead. Sunfyre might be dead in the show, and they're going to do very different things.
Yeah, I mean, so here's why I don't think that Sunfyre is dead. What I think is Sunfyre, remember, in the way information travels, Aegon, when he says Sunfire's dead, is also at like a very low point in his life. Thinking his brother wants to kill him, all of the things. I think what's likely to happen is that Sunfyre is going to obviously be alive and perhaps like in hiding or something, who knows, in a cave, or we don't know. But I think they're going to use it ultimately as a moment of like Aegon's reappearance onto the scene as returning as the king.
Yeah.
Right. And Larys is going to help him get there. And Larys may also know the whereabouts of Sunfyre. And that may be the thing that happens is Sunfyre is alive and has regained some strength, and Aegon will do the same, because Aegon has some actually like important roles to play going forward, when like he has to, because he's left King's Landing and he's got to go take it back.
Yeah.
So when he goes and does that, and he's got and he's gonna do some traveling. We know he goes to Dragonstone, he goes to some other places. So yeah, I think it's likely that we're gonna see Sunfyre obviously alive and do it. Because if they don't, then like now you're talking about it's tough, because they're spending all this time trying to connect Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, and that would be an enormous retcon. And then of all of the people who says it in Game of Thrones, Joffrey is like the one person who you would want to believe on this thing.
Yeah.
Right.
It's true.
I mean, it's not like if Tyrion said it, you should really believe it's true. But like, we're talking about a brutal death. That's kind of Joffrey's expert area. I mean,
and he isn't known for his history lessons, right? So like,
exactly,
he knows that one by heart, because he's a sadist.
Right.
It's terrible. But
yeah,
I don't know, man. I just think that they've went so far out of their way now to make it seem like Sunfire's dead, that whenever they do the twist and say, hey, Sunfire's actually alive, it just seems Here's the thing. It seems a little far-fetched that no one in Rook's Rest would send a raven to King's Landing and say, hey, by the way, the dragon down here eating people, we need it to go. Like, you know what I'm saying? Now, I'm going to argue with myself a little bit. I don't know how much time has really passed. What has it been? 2 weeks? Maybe the dragon is still down and out, and they're trying to fight for its life at this moment. Like, I don't know, but I still think that they would send a raven, dude. Like, I don't understand why they would send a raven.
You would think.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm a little worried about this one. I mean, Sunfyre should be alive. I would rather Sunfyre be alive. I just think that they're trying to set up this big twist, and I think it's a little too far for me personally. But we'll see. I don't know how they're going to do it yet. And we got to remember, Aegon's leaving King's Landing with Larys in a wagon at the end of season 2. Where is he going? And where the hell was Otto?
Tier 3 of the iceberg, right? As we slowly descend here. So Daemon chases a dog, goat, and bats in Harrenhal. So throughout season 2 of House of the Dragon, Daemon Targaryen, both in and outside of his visions at Harrenhal, continues to see very specific animals in the castles. These include dogs, a goat, bats, all symbols of characters who will later be in control of Harrenhal. The goat refers to Vargo Hoat. The bats refer to House Losten, who even had some members of their family said to be vampires, and the dogs refer to House Clegane. So again, as we said, some of this stuff is a little more informational. Some of it is stuff we kind of already know, that's part of this, but there are some theories we could begin diving into here, Jimmy. But just first, let's talk about some of those animals. Do you think that's a coincidence that we saw those things?
No.
And what do you think those deeper connections are to that?
Well, I mean, at the very least, I think it's just a nod to things that happen in Harrenhal in the future, and the idea that Harrenhal is this almost like mystical, creepy, haunted place. Obviously, the past of Harrenhal has had a big effect on people that have come there in the present time. So this is a little bit of a weird one because we're not talking about past events; we're talking about future events. So is Harrenhal in some weird like bubble where time is almost like, I'm thinking like almost like a 40 kind of thing. Obviously, it's not that sci-fi, but it's just interesting that this seems, at least to me, to be the first time that we're seeing more future things hinted at Harrenhal rather than the past. Though Daemon's visions are full of things and prophecies and whatnot, so he's kind of unique in that regard. Obviously, this is something that's exclusive to the show. I would say this is more show canon than anything. Very, very cool, and I quite like it. There's been a thing throughout history, and other fantasy series have played with this too, is the idea that when something very tragic happens or like a lot of people lose their lives, that place becomes like marked and can become more supernatural. And I just wonder if that monumentous moment with Aegon the Conqueror did not change the very DNA of where like Harrenhal sits. So I think it's a good nod at the very least. And then there's probably some really cool connections that we could make to other things in the series.
Yeah, exactly. You look at some of these animals or some of the houses that have all taken over Harrenhal too and will in the future, and a lot of them have failed. Right? A lot of the,
Yeah.
they
Oh,
all, that's
most.
kind of the
Yeah.
curse. That's kind of the curse of Harrenhal, essentially, is that every house who takes it over is going to die. I mean, we even in this show, we've already seen the Strongs. They go there, and
Mm-hmm.
of course, it could just be foul play by Larys. And you could say, well, in theory, every place is cursed because the houses are always at war with each other, stabbing each other in the back. But Harrenhal itself seems to be a little more specific, and I do like that they dove deeper into some of that with the visions that Daemon is having there as well. Even if you go just when show canon, Tywin Lannister takes it over, which is obviously different than the books where it's Roose Bolton who takes it over and serves as Arya's cupbearer. And Roose Bolton is still currently alive in the books, but obviously we know he dies in the show. I think it's likely he will not survive the book series as well. So that will sort of end up being his fate. But Daemon also goes and takes over Harrenhal, and again, this is full spoilers, so we know Daemon's end may come to a crashing halt, right? Perhaps sort of over Harrenhal, or at least over the lake that sits next to Harrenhal. So it could be part of that as well. Now, there is something else, and I saw some people talking about this, is that the goat, they're saying, might be even somewhat more specific. And this ties into, since it is specifically a black goat that he saw, which is actually a deity worshipped in the free city of Qohor. So in Qohor, they worship the black goat. He feeds on blood offerings every day. On holy days, he is offered condemned criminals. And in times of great crisis, he may even be offered the nobles' children of the city to beg his protection. Does he accept their gift? Well, the city still stands. And you actually can see a statue of a black goat along with other statues of other various gods in the House of Black and White, which is the Temple of the Faceless Men in Game of Thrones season 5, when Arya is there doing her training. You can see idols of foreign gods being sold to the street vendors in King's Landing, and among some of them are black goats, and they're smashed by the Faith militant when they storm the city's streets. So in the book, there's a little bit more, and I want to talk about this. The World of Ice and Fire explains that the Black Goat is indeed the central deity of Cohort's religion. It started out as a cult of religious descendants in the Valyrian Freehold, who later founded Cohort as a religious colony, similar to how Norvos was founded by the bearded priests. Unlike the bearded priests of Norvos, however, the religion of the Black Goat has a rather unsavory reputation. The Black Goat requires daily blood sacrifice. The typical sacrifices are calves, bulls, and horses, but on high holy days, condemned criminals are also sacrificed to the Black Goat, while in times of great danger. The nobles of the city will even sacrifice their children to the Black Goat to try to appease him, to grant them safety. This ill repute may be what made its adherents leave Valyria. The Black Goat is regarded as an untrustworthy demon in the religion of the bearded priests, although this hasn't stopped Norvos and Cohort from joining forces when necessary. So there is even sort of like an ancient Valyria tie to the Black Goat. Now, it could just be because we see the other animals that it is House Clegane and all of those things, but they do sort of emphasize more that goat that we see, and it is specifically a black goat. And you talk about blood sacrifices. Alys Rivers there. We have another theory with her coming up a little bit later about exactly what it is she's putting in that drink she gives to Daemon. But there is sort of like, that's kind of why I wanted to include it a little bit further down on the iceberg, because there is that as well. And maybe they just showed dogs, and there's bats in Harrenhall because it's old, so maybe that was the focus of it. But they did sort of emphasize that goat a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think it's fascinating to think about it from this angle, and that's why it is deeper on the iceberg, because there is this other, I would say, more unlikely connection to it. So we have to put it a little bit deeper down. I don't think it's necessarily connected to this, though I love the fact that we could go down that road if we wanted to. My question to you, Matt, is, and this is kind of like independent of this, just thinking about the faceless man and everything, do you think we see a faceless man in House of the Dragon? I mean, they've obviously are doing.
I'm shocked we haven't. I'm actually shocked we haven't. And you and I had talked about this beforehand, because remember, before House of the Dragon season 1 came out, you and I were saying, man, what are some cool ways they could connect these shows? And the one I said, and I think I made a TikTok about this. We may have actually included it on the iceberg. I can't remember. I think we did of season 1, but I said, I think a cool way to do it would be Jack and Hagar. To have the faceless men, they're just using faces. It would be a very cool way to do it. Another one was Melisandre, and I always forget her first name, but I think her last name's like Van Houten. She, the actress who plays Melisandre, she specifically said, like, I want to be in House of the Dragon. She specifically said that, and so that would be another character who could be very cool to tie it together. Now, of course, they have made connections that we were not expecting, like the dagger and the Song of Ice and Fire, and now Daemon having these prophecies. But I am very shocked we haven't seen more faceless men, or even really mention of them, as we're like doing these political assassinations. Like, why haven't they been mentioned? Why hasn't some of the other stuff in Essos been mentioned as much, like perhaps the Iron Bank, or hiring mercenaries to strengthen your army, the Gold Company. Well, the Gold Company, but maybe they're not around quite yet, but like some of the, because that ties into Bitter Steel and stuff later. So okay, but you know what I mean? Yeah, like some of these mercenary forces you could go get from Essos to bring over.
Yeah, and faceless men, I mean, at this point, maybe it just hasn't had as much of an effect in Westeros, but I think that there's a really good opportunity to bring them in. And we could say, well, it wasn't mentioned in the histories. Well, faceless men tend to be a little bit more hidden throughout history, I would say. So I think it would be a pretty easy tie-in. We obviously have the death of Aegon later on, and some people speculate how or why this happens, and we have our own theories about that.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that here in a little bit.
But hey, who's to say that the person doesn't hire a faceless man? I mean, that could obviously be a thing. It just seems like faceless men is one of those things that people really attached on in the main series, and they're clearly trying to connect ties. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it. If it were to happen, though, you would think it would have to come from the High Towers, considering that they're the richest family, I think, at this point in Westeros. Like, they're kind of the Lannisters of this time. Like, they're very well off. So it makes me think that it would have to come from either the Crown or the High Towers if we were going to see them. So I don't know. Who knows? But when I saw the Black Goat thing, I thought, oh, that was cool. But it got me my wheels turning more about like, well, maybe this is possible that we'll see a faceless man in House of the Dragon. Who knows?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I'm with you. I think I would love to see it. I specifically want it to be Jack and Hagar, simply because I think that would be such a cool way to do it. And that gives you your end of the episode, like, oh yeah, type
Yeah,
of
it would definitely be
thing
fan servicey, but I like that
right.
service. I have no problem with it.
Well, because it's fan service that works. It's
Yeah,
different.
fan
Like
service
it's
is
different
not
when
inherently negative. Yeah, I agree.
right. Yeah, if you do it in a way that's not like, hey, we did the thing, then it's awesome.
Yeah, I think that fan service gets a bad rap nowadays on the internet, but I don't think that it's always bad. It can be done well, just like anything. I don't necessarily love triangles in the books I read, but every now and then I come across a love triangle and I'm like, that was really well done. So we got to keep an open mind to things like that. And I wouldn't mind seeing Jack and Hagar again, to be honest with you. But thinking about people who kill Aegon, we're going to move right down the iceberg here and slide into Alicent kills Aegon. Theory, or a proposition possibly, but Aegon II's death is considered a mystery in the books as the king is poisoned following the death of Rhaenyra. Some speculate that mayhaps Larys Strong or Corlys Velaryon had a role to play in the king's demise. The show, however, could be leading us down a darker path. As we saw in the final episode of season 2, Alicent was ready to let Rhaenyra kill Aegon, a son for a son, so perhaps it will be Alicent who kills Aegon, as she might view it as a way to end this needless war, or she feels it as a religious calling, or simply to give herself something to do, since she essentially doesn't do anything in the books after this point. The show is obviously giving her a much bigger role to play, so this could tie in here. This is very interesting because Alicent in Fire and Blood is tied to Jaehaerys and Viserys, people who meet untimely ends possibly, and there's always been speculation in Fire and Blood that possibly Alicent could have had something to do with the deaths of Jaehaerys and Viserys. Could the show go down a route to put her in the position to take out her own son? Especially, by the way, we in season 2 and she's saying you can have him and he has left, which is going to cause obviously the shitstorm that is the fall of King's Landing. So it's very you have a point. Whoever came up with this theory, you might have a point. I'm not saying it's for sure, but I don't think it's the most far-fetched thing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the reason I thought about this was, as we've said, Alicent really doesn't do a whole lot in the show, in the books. Excuse me. I mean, really, once the war starts, I mean, everything she's doing right now in the show is way more stuff than she does in the book. She really, I mean, quite literally falls off the pages of the story as to what's important.
Yeah, where we're at, she takes a backseat majorly. I mean, really, beginning of the war, it's Aegon, Rhaenyra.
I mean, she basically is non-existent in the books until we hear about her death. I mean, literally, that's sort of it. And obviously, again, we're in spoiler territory, so she just sort of dies of summer fever, a chill later, way after the war is over. So it's obvious that the showrunners are going to be giving her much more to do, since they built her up to be this whole thing about Alicent versus Rhaenyra. And obviously Olivia Cook, you want to use her on screen as much as possible because she's fantastic. So the fact that they did go that route with Rhaenyra saying a son for a son and Alicent being okay with it, this could give them, I mean, you could have a really strong dramatic moment where she's the one who decides to do it. Maybe he's much more injured. I mean, there's a lot more war that has to go on. He's already not in great place, and she could view it as, I mean, just the way she would, if she is the one who does it, then how the decision that she comes to, I mean, that's sort of really kind of been her role this season, is going through the emotions of this whole thing and justifying the decision she's making and trying to come to terms with it and dealing with the weight of her, decisions, sleeping with Kristen Cole, and he's not there to protect Helena when the blood and cheese come. And, she had to get married to Viserys. It did not necessarily something she wanted to do. And, all of these decisions. And now we're going to see the fallout of her saying, I'll essentially let you sneak in and take Aegon,
maybe an atonement for past sins, right? Like that's kind of maybe the idea.
And once Rhaenyra dies too, that's going to be really interesting. I do feel like the show will focus a lot on how Alicent handles it, since that's been the whole story. is that. So I could see Alicent actually being the one to do it, since they've already given us this little bit here. Because I think the most common belief is that, Corlys Valerion certainly sort of said, like, he's not the one who does it, but I would imagine hires somebody, or somebody lets it. The most common belief is that it's Larys is the one who does it. And as we did see, Larys is getting much closer with the king, and it's a way for them to say, let's end this thing. Let's marry off the children and basically start fresh, which is what Hour of the Wolf is all about. Where Craig and Stark comes in, and he's like, hey, somebody murdered the king and somebody's going to pay for it. And so they kill Larys.
And I believe that Stark wants to be the one to dethrone Aegon. Like, he's mad that he didn't get the opportunity. Like, he wanted to do it. So I think this is going to happen? I would say probably not, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, especially like you said, with them inventing a lot of Alicent's arc at this point. And she's already made a very tough decision for her son. And Aegon is going to ruin that plan. Clearly, he's not in King's Landing. So who knows where Alicent will get thrown to? But this is one that it's like I could see it, but who knows?
I think I feel pretty confident that it's going to happen.
You're locking it in.
I think so.
You're locking it in.
I feel like 90%. I mean, of course, we have to see season 3 to see how it unfolds. But I'd say right now, I feel 90% sure it's going to be Alicent, simply for the fact that the showrunners need to give her something to do.
You heard
it's still, I mean, it is still a cool way to do it, and it is a mystery in the books. And the way the Larys is dealing with Aegon right now, I'd have to see what happens with him to see why he wouldn't want to potentially support an Aegon further. Like, if this whole war is over, because I mean, they win. Daemon is dead, and dead, air quotes, and Aemond is gone, and they kill Rhaenyra. So why do they then poison Aegon? That's the interesting thing about it, right? I mean, Larys could certainly know about it and be part of it, and maybe they will sort of change Aegon's personality to where after this whole war, he becomes like much brutal, and they think like, this could be like a Maegor the Cruel again, and they're like, we don't want to go down that route. So I'm curious as to why they would decide to to go down that route of killing him, and we'll see how it happens in the show, of course. But yeah, I think it's going to be Alicent.
Yeah, I'm not willing to put the pen to the paper and sign off on this deal yet, but you heard it here first. Matt locked it in. He said Alicent will kill her kin. We've also seen, remember, because Helena will have died by that point, so Aegon could become more unhinged. Yeah, absolutely. Aegon could be more unhinged at that point, and we have seen what they've done with Aegon here, where he's like, yeah, we're going to hang up all the rat catchers. So they're. I mean, Aegon has plenty of things that people could take him to task for. I mean, the serving maid, right, in season 1, and fathering a ton of bastards down at Fleabag. I mean, Aegon is not clean, at this point.
Sure.
So, and that kind of factors into the son for a son thing. Maybe she felt like he was already too far gone, anyways. Like, maybe it's just time. I don't know. We'll have to see. I mean, taking out your own son, one, to give him up at the end of the season was wild, but to then be the one to do the deed is a whole nother step. So we're gonna have to see a lot of development to get her there, and maybe we will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Let's move on. So this is one I had talked about this a little bit on a Patreon as well, and you and I have been talking about it. Actually, there's a couple of Patrons we talked about it. And it's a character who's going to show up in. Well, it depends on the outline, of course, of how far they get in season 3 and season 4. Mm-hmm. We will certainly see this character in one of those seasons, and that is the character of the Sheppherd. So one mysterious character in the books is the Sheppherd, a character who begins speaking out publicly against the dragons and Targaryens. The Sheppherd ultimately stirs up the small folk and eventually leads to a revolt and storming of the dragon pit. This character is completely unknown in the books, but could be played by somebody we already know in the show.
Now here's my problem, Matt. Now you just said Alicent was going to kill Aegon, but I think wasn't she also a front runner for Sheppherd for you as well?
This character has been if you go listen to our Patreon episodes, this character has been floating around a lot for me as to who it could be.
Yeah,
At
I think this
first,
is your favorite thing, trying to figure out, like, this is
it
your
is.
pet thing, yeah.
It is, because at first I was like, man, this character is so important, and they're gonna be important to a big, role or event. So who are they ultimately gonna get to play it? Because it's gonna need to be somebody who is sort of part of the faith, and which they may actually take that part out. They may actually
They
rip out.
could.
I actually kind of think they will, to be honest, and it's just going to be more of like a leader of the small folk in
Yeah.
general, because I think they are going to want to remove this from like the faith in the main series, like the Sparrow. So I kind of think they're going to rip that part out of this character. So it's just really described in the book as there's not a ton about it. During the Dance of the Dragons, the shepherd began to preach against Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen. This is obviously after, in Cobbler Square, saying that dragons were demons, spawns of godless Valyria. Munkin believes that shepherds spread the story that Rhaenyra and Sir Luther Largent were the ones to murder Queen Helena, who, remember, she gets thrown off of and she lands on the spikes. Make her sword fast. During the riots in King's Landing, the shepherd led a mod in the storming of the dragon pit, where 3 of the Black's dragons and 1 of the Green's dragons dwelled. Tale lists the shepherd as the slayer of the dragon Syrax, Rhaenyra's mount. The shepherd allegedly stood alone against the dragon, calling upon the 7 for succor until the warrior manifested and beheaded Syrax. So my question for this character, since it is sort of like a mystery character, although then the character does get captured and stuff, so I kind of think that they're gonna I think they're gonna I just don't think it's gonna be some new character.
I think
they're really gonna play with this character a lot.
I think the most likely candidate is the survey maid from season 1 that Aegon abused, and then in season 2 she's in the bar getting her rump slapped by Ulf. I think it'll be her. I think that they kept her around for a purpose.
It could be a man. It could be a man or a woman, for sure.
Yeah, I would not be surprised to see it be a woman. Also, I think the second most likely, if it's going to be someone existing, would be Mysaria. I think Mysaria could possibly end up in this role, especially because we've seen her go back and forth King's Landing. She has people there, so she could kind of stir up controversy. And then the third, which is not an existing member, would be someone totally brand new, kind of like the Sparrow in Game of Thrones. So if you remember, one of the big theories going into that season, and it's a theory that's around in the books as well, is that the Sparrow is Howland Reed. And I don't buy into it personally. I think it's a really fun theory. Like, it's a really cool one to go down. However, it did not turn out to be true in the show. I doubt it will be in the books either, but it was a brand new person and they kind of just were able to do that. So I don't think it's unlikely that it could be someone brand new, especially just with how willing they seem to be to switch POVs and bring in new characters and whatever. But if I had to put money on it, I would probably pick that serving girl. Season 1.
I mean, this character's ultimate demise is that essentially Aegon captures them and kills them, burns them alive.
Yes.
Which could also lead to one of the reasons they're like, we need to get rid of Aegon because he's going crazy. Part of me thinks, because again, the timeline now is also getting so smushed with the budget cuts and everything. I think this might end up being Aegon.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I kind of think that so this character is one of the characters I think they're going to change the absolute most. I don't think we're going to see some like random new person, which you just said it might be that serving lady. I think this character might just get morphed into somebody who causes stirs amongst the small folk to go storm the dragon pit. So my reason for it potentially being Aegon is you could do something where you have him like hiding in plain sight. A lot of the small folk don't know what he looks like now because he's burned and morphed, and it would be a way for him to sort of from the inside, because remember, he's like sneaking off with Larys now, and you could raise the small folk to get them to do a lot of the work for you, because they basically go out and take out a bunch of dragons.
This might be the most tinfoil theory that you have.
Should this have been tier 5, maybe?
I'm listening, but this is wild. This would be a massive change, right? My
initial thought was that it was going to be Laenor Valeryon. Like, sort of before
I
the
remember,
season,
yeah.
I was like, ooh, Laenor could come back, because I thought really thought they were going to bring that character back. And maybe now, his mom has died, someone
Right.
has taken his dragon.
Mhm.
And of course they went down the dragon bonding path. But I was like, I see a scenario in which it could be him, like a totally distraught. Now he's like a bum. He fled over to Essos, all of these things where he feels like everything he's ever had has been taken away from him, and it's all because of like Rhaenyra, right,
Mhm.
and all of that, because he was married her. So it was like maybe they go with like that sort of a route where now he's like in the streets, a cobbler. He just preaching out against the dragon's faults and all these things.
Mhm.
That was my sort of initial thought. Then I was like, maybe it will be that serving girl, because they're showing her quite a bit,
Yeah.
and maybe it's just to give the small folk essentially a face that we can attach to and
I think
see all of the
that's
bad things that's
yeah.
happening. So yeah, I just feel like it's just they're gonna I feel like they're gonna completely remove the faith equation from it just to keep it
I could see that.
different. And because of the time constraints, this character, in all honesty, this character might get cut.
Oh,
This character, and they
so
could just
I see what
they
you're saying.
could just cause a riot somehow
And
else.
it could be
Like,
the serving girl leading the charge in that scene, but not necessarily being the leader. Like I know what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
right.
And you might not be wrong.
This character might just
Well, just think about the
get
small
completely
folk are a
cut.
character in themselves in this show at this point, right? And we're going to see a lot of comeuppance for everything that they've suffered through in the first two seasons, and then even more so here coming. But I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think I would prefer it to be a true small folk person like the serving maid, because one of the things that annoys me in TV or fantasy books is whenever like the common person like can't do anything without the nobility leading them, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like removes agency from the common folk completely. So I think it would do a disservice to the kind of we'll call it a revenge plot, I guess, for the small folk and Flea Bottom. Or the people of King's Landing. So I actually hope that it's either an original character like they haven't showed us yet, or it would be like the serving maid. I would like that more. Massaria could work because she has been in the bottom caste of society before and does feel like she has motives that we're not aware of yet, so she could work. But overall, they could cut the character in a big storyline, but the storming of the dragon pit 100% happens for sure.
100%.
Yeah, it'll be one of the biggest moments in the show, probably. That'll be
Yeah.
a tough one to watch if you're a fan of dragons.
Yeah, that's gonna be the one where everyone's like, they killed all the dragons, I'm out.
Yeah, you're right. They might want to save it and move it around and make it the last episode, because people are going to be upset.
Yeah. And then this character might just get cut and they just have a riot somewhere else. But the storming of the dragon pit is definitely happening.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Ready for the next one, Jimmy?
All right, let's get to it. This one is cool. Probably goes into the line of maybe fan service stuff again, but I kind of enjoy this one. So Daemon will have visions of Dunk and Egg. As we've seen in season 2 of House of the Dragon, Daemon Targaryen has already had visions of some of the events of Game of Thrones. Along with the dagger and the Song of Ice and Fire, Daemon seems like the character to be bridging the two series together through connections. Given that season 3 will take place after the first season of The Hedge Knight, it's likely, if these visions continue, that Daemon will have some ties to future events in his timeline to the upcoming seasons of Dunk and Egg. Of course, cross promotion I think is possible and maybe even likely. We saw Bloodraven, and it makes you in his vision in season 2, and it almost makes you wonder if that's the Bloodraven we will see in the Dunk and Egg show, possibly, because even right there, then technically we've already seen it. Like, this would be true at that point, right? It does make you wonder what he will see, and if it were up to me, it would be a scene of Summerhall just burning, maybe with Dunk in the foreground, as it's going on. That would be pretty cool. But I would not be shocked to see a little bit of connection through the shows. I think that you can probably imagine there'll be a connective tissue between them all.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about this a little bit too in tier 4, but yeah, I definitely think that if Daemon's having visions of the events of Game of Thrones, he will 1000% have visions of Dunk and Egg, since it'll be like these shows will be, and that just to bridge the gap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think In some way, it's
I
gonna
agree
happen.
with you. I think it'll be stuff that's sort of like the way Bran has visions in the books where he sees like a knight and a woman. It's like, oh, is that old Nan and Dunk perhaps?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. And I think Daemon will have stuff that's vague. Of course, the things he's seen of the main series, well, we already know what happens. We kind of don't know actually what happens in Dunk and Egg, so they can play around with it a little bit. Something like Summerhall where it's like maybe it's just a baby's being born outside of a building that's on fire, and like we hear Dunk's voice or something. Not to give, you don't want to give away Dunk and Egg, but it is also 7 years in the future, so
Very, very interesting what they could do
I
here.
mean
And how much
it
of
would be,
Dunkin' Egg do they even want to give away, you know?
right. How much? Well, I guess when I said 7 years in the future, sorry, I meant what I mean by that is it's seven. It's 7 stories. The Dunk and Egg is 7 stories. So, and filming wise, that could be like 10 years. However long it takes to do. Like if they do all of what's supposed to be Dunk and Egg and it's 7 seasons, I mean that could be like 14 years from now. By the
Oh, definitely.
crazy to think about.
Yeah, it could be absolutely the next decade. We could be talking about these two shows somehow. So we'll have to see.
Yeah. All right, Jimmy, let's dive into tier 4. Things are about to get a little deeper and a little more crazy. So this is one we kind of talked about. This is one we actually talked about in our season 1 House of the Dragon Iceberg, but now it's got pulled back a little bit because now it's a lot less crazy. So that is Daemon is the precursor to the three-eyed crow / raven. The biggest mystery in Fire, Blood, and perhaps the World of Ice and Fire is what happens to Daemon Targaryen after the Battle of the God's Eye. Does Daemon simply die? His body is never recovered, unlike Aemon Targaryen's. If Daemon does survive, then what happens? Does he fly off with Nettle, or does he swim to a nearby piece of land that's most likely the Isle of Faces? Given that we are now seeing Daemon have Weirwood visions, this seems even more likely, and he could even serve as a version of the three-eyed crow / raven that serves before Bloodraven, then Bran. The three-eyed crow is a mystery in itself, since we specifically see Bloodraven pass the mantle on to Bran in the show and is training him in that role for the books. Is there one before him?
Yeah, so this is one that was on the original Iceberg, and I think it was literally on the last tier. Like we were like, this is so improbable, but what a fun theory. And then this season came out.
We had it slightly different.
Yeah,
we had said that we think Daemon may be the three-eyed raven. In the books, it's the three-eyed crow. And we think Daemon may be the three-eyed raven in the Game of Thrones TV show, because in the books, we know it is Brendan Rivers' Bloodraven.
Right.
However, in the show, they make zero mention of him being that character. He doesn't even have a lot of the same features that we've already seen in the Bloodraven of this show, right? We've now seen a Bloodraven with the blotch on his face. They switch actors between the two who played him. The second version of Bloodraven has, who we see more, or the three-eyed raven, I should say, has short hair as opposed to the long hair we see of the first person who plays him, which is like literally one scene and then Bran's gone for an entire season. So, but there's no mention of him being Bloodraven of, House Targaryen and all of those things. So we had said what they could do at that point when reviewing this before all of this was they could simply make Daemon essentially that character, the three-eyed, like the character we see in Game of Thrones is going to be Daemon. Then, of course, they announced that, because remember at that point they were like, well, we got some shows we're working on, but some might get canceled. So it's like, well, we may never see a Dunk and Egg TV show.
Right. Which
now
was possible at the time.
Totally possible at that time that we would never even see a Dunk and Egg TV show. So now we're getting it. So that totally, I think, wipes that out. But it has kind of morphed into Daemon may be this sort of precursor, which is something we've theorized in the books. Is there somebody before Bloodraven? Because we see Bloodraven pass the mantle in the show. Of course, in the books, it's going to happen. He's already preparing Bran for that role. But so if Bloodraven passes the mantle of the three-eyed crow or raven onto Bran, does somebody do the same for Bloodraven?
Right. And I think that I'm at the point now. Maybe this is my big tinfoil. I mean, I think that this is going to happen. I think that Daemon is going to end up being in the Weirwood. Like, I think that he will be the precursor to Blood Raven, and he might even come back for the Dunk and Egg show at the end of it. Who knows? I mean,
that's what I think too. I think he is, because Blood Raven. So if you look at the timeline here, Blood Raven isn't really in the first two Dunk and Egg stories. He's obviously heavily prevalent, even though he's in disguise in the third one, which would be season 3 of Dunk and Egg. But by the time you get to there, House of the Dragon will be over.
Yes.
So it's actually sort of perfect timing for all of this to unfold so that you could actually have Matt Smith as this character in Dunk and Egg you could have Daemon Targaryen as this precursor. Perhaps he's stuck on the Isle of Faces. I don't think he goes to the cave that Blood Raven goes to, because it's the Weirwood trees and they're all connected. So if he's like on the Isle of Faces, then you could actually have, I mean, I just don't think they would do it, but you could have a flashback scene in like season 3 with Blood Raven being at the tourney, which is close to the Isle. And then you could have Matt Smith like in character on there, because you obviously can't show, you couldn't show like Matt Smith as that in season 1, because then everyone would be like, well, what the hell does that mean for season 4 of House of the Dragon?
Oh yeah, it certainly wouldn't happen in season 1 and 2. It'd probably be 3, or you go all the way down. I mean, who knows how far the show runs? But like Blood Raven's incident where he gets sent to the wall is a little further on.
Sure.
So
and maybe Matt Smith wants to take a break, and
and also who knows? Maybe they don't end up doing that. But I do think that it's going to be alluded to that Daemon Targaryen is the precursor to Blood Raven or something. Or it's. I mean, there's going to be more of a tie there. At least it feels that way.
Yeah, I mean, he's having visions of Weirwood. We have our next theory dives a little bit more into that as well. And we've now seen Greenman. We know what happens at the Isle of Faces. What is if he survives. And there's just so much going on there that I think it's also, I think HBO is going to push hard for it.
Well, it seems like they are not afraid to get into the fantastical at all.
Yeah, real quick, by the way, and this is another reason. I know sometimes we talk about like the outside stuff. It seemed like Ted Lasso season 4 was not going to happen, or if it was going to happen, like Jason Sudeikis was not going to be part of it. Warner Brothers just announced, no, Ted Lasso season 4 is happening and he's coming back. So, yeah. So, I mean, obviously they're willing to, we know that their budget constraints are a whole big deal, but it seems like they can still have enough sway to be like, no, we want to make something happen. We're going to do whatever it takes to make it happen. Maybe not with the budget we ultimately want, and whatever. Over there, they've got Apple paying part of it, so they can obviously have a lot more money to spend. But
and it's the show that has kept Apple TV relevant, even though Apple TV is actually really underrated.
Right, but ultimately, what I'm getting to is apparently they are capable of making it happen if they want it to happen. So I think you could have Matt Smith come back in a couple of years, or it's just 1 year after, or whatever, if that timeline works out, and just have him do maybe he only does 1 to 2 episodes.
Oh, I think it'd be a one-off.
To give us that connection.
I think it'd be a one-off, and it would be a scene kind of like Viserys coming back in House of the Dragon season 2. As long as they set it up and do it well, it could be really cool. And this is show only stuff, right? This is show only canon. I don't think Daemon Targaryen in the books is the precursor to Blood. He could be. He could be, but we don't really have a reason to believe it at this point.
I think there is still some justification for it.
I mean, you could build a bridge, but I don't know if there's a lot of evidence for it.
Well, I think the evidence is pretty similar, but it's obviously here they dive way more into the fantastical. But the events in the books of him, does he die? We don't know. His body's never recovered. George specifically writes it to say it's very obvious that they find Aemon Targaryen and they do not find Daemon.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what people suggest from Fire and Blood is they feel like he runs off with Nettles to kind of be
which he could
free. Which, I think that's likely from Fire and Blood's framing of it. But I guess all I'm saying is people who are listening is no, there's no way. Well, remember, we're just talking about show canon at this point in House of the Dragon. So House of the Dragon is going to do a lot more to connect these things because it's beneficial to HBO to get you to watch the next show that they come out with. So.
Yeah, you have to take that in. Yeah, and he could even just do voice work until like a season 4 or 5 of
absolutely
of Duncan Egg or the Hedge Knight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let's dive into this next one here, Jimmy.
Yeah, the next one is kind of a Daemon Weirwood adjacent, and it's Alys Rivers is using Weirwood paste. Alys Rivers has been one of the biggest surprise characters in season 2 of House of the Dragon, as the show has turned her into much more important of a character lore-wise. We see her not only giving Daemon advice, but steering him to make certain decisions. She is also brewing him some sort of drink. Along with his Weirwood bed and perhaps the ghost of Harrenhall themselves, Daemon is having prophetic dreams and visions. Fans have speculated about the drink that Alys brews for Daemon, since she clearly has knowledge and ties to the Weirwood trees. As we know in the books, Bran is likely drinking Weirwood paste to help enhance his green dreams, so is Alys doing the same for Daemon? This is a very fun one. I think that I've seen arguments on both sides of this one, and I'm about 50-50, but it's clear it's something. Like, it has to be something pretty significant. I do not expect this to ever be confirmed. So in my headcanon, it's Weirwood paste because that's cooler.
I'm with you. Yeah, they'll never speculate, or they'll never dive into exactly what it is that she's making. I think just the idea that it could be, paste from the, some Weirwood trees, and it's giving him these visions it's all it's ever going to be. We might get slightly a little bit more about exactly what it is Bran is drinking in the books in the event Winds of Winter ever comes out, of course. Some people think might be Jojen that
I think it's Jojen. I think
he's drinking Jojen. Right, that leaf is sort of flaying Jojen a little bit and feeding
good Lord.
That's a Bran. Who knows? That's even more crazy. That's what a lot of people think with that too, and there's certainly some evidence for it. But yeah, I'm with you. We'll never actually know exactly what it is Alys Rivers is making, but I do like the idea. And then, of course, that expands things further a little bit to be like, can anybody have a green dream if it's through some of this, Weirwood tree paste drink that she's making? Is she just brewing him something else to cause him to have these weird trips? Is it just Harrenhal itself? Is it dragon dreams? Some people think the dragons have their own versions of dreams, like Helaena. I mean, Helaena is like a huge surprise character in what they're doing with her and her visions.
And connected to Daemon.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's even, that's been a big cause of concern too. Are dragon dreams different than green dreams, which is what like Bran has, who doesn't have as ties to the dragons, or Jojen has? Or are dragon dreams just, are they their own thing? Is it a power of lore, type of a thing? So that's the cool gray area that George creates in this whole universe, where things can kind of blend together. Might be the same thing, might not. But yeah, I do think that she's probably making a Weirwood paste, but they'll never dive into exactly what it is she's making.
And it's not harmful to the story to think so. So I will go ahead and say that it is just for fun. Why not?
Yeah. All right, here we go. Let's dive into tier 5 here. The craziest of the crazy. Okay.
Oh my God.
And by the time this comes out, I did also make a TikTok of it, and I'll probably turn likely a lot of these into TikToks as well. But is Alicent Hightower a warg? Throughout Game of Thrones, we see many characters who have the ability to warg, or to take over another person or animal's consciousness and control that being. Bran was able to control his wolf Summer, ravens, and Hodor. Oral, a wildling, was able to control an eagle and even use it to attack Jon Snow. In the books, several of the Starks unknowingly control their wolves in their sleep. This ability is usually shown by the character having their eyes roll into the back of their heads, similar to what we see with Alicent Hightower in Season 2 of House of the Dragon. Interestingly, while she does seem to be having an out-of-body experience, we didn't see if Alicent was in control of an animal or person. Usually the warg goes inside of another creature, while this time Kristen Cole was inside of her.
My God, Matt. What are we doing here, man?
We're having fun. We're just having fun here on the craziest of crazy tiers.
You have lost your mind.
Her eyes looked like it. They look just like Bran, just like Oral, just like the Undertaker. Okay. She was having an out-of-body experience.
Hey, who knows? Maybe under Bran's cloak in that wheelchair, that's where Mira Reed went. Who knows? I'm just
seriously.
Good Lord, Matt. This is your invention, by the way, just so everyone's clear. We didn't find this online. This wasn't so Matt dug deep into the recesses of his mind and said, well, what if?
I mean, she could be.
So ridiculous.
That should actually show you how, we had a ton of tier 5 theories for season 1, but some of those things have now moved down because it's like, well, now it's way less crazy.
Yeah. Now we're just writing smutty Alicent fanfic as our last tier. Yeah, you really outdid yourself on this one, bud.
That was just fun. It was just fun.
It's absolutely hilarious. Oh man.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what?
It feels good to cap off House of Dragon season 2 with a good laugh. It feels good.
Yeah, we could have dove into stuff like, oh, did budget cuts affect the season? Yes, they did, obviously. Obviously, and some of those things. And but yeah, I thought we kind of end our House of the Dragon discussion with, before we dive back into the books with something kind of fun and silly.
Yeah, because overall we had a good time. We had our complaints about the season, but we had a good time with it. And I do think that season 3 and 4, there's going to be a lot less room for humor because people gonna die. There'll be a lot of people dying. So get it in now before it's just all emotional reactions for season 3 and 4.
I don't know. I can't even think about our season 3 and 4 Iceberg. I mean, there's really not going to be that much to speculate on because now we'll be.
There probably won't be now.
Yeah,
this is probably the end.
Are they going to? Yeah, I mean, we'll still certainly do one, but and we did also do one, by the way, for the Hedge Knight, Duncan Egg. Things we, think, and we kind of did all 3 of them. It was really kind of a Duncan Egg, like it was kind of like all 3 of the books. And we went through a lot of the big theories and stuff like that. And of course, once we see the show, we'll do another one for that. And I like doing these icebergs, so we might do some more as well. Just pick a character and kind of do icebergs on them because one, they do really well on the podcast and YouTube. So obviously you guys are enjoying them. And 2, they're also just a lot of fun to make because then we get to specifically dive into like one certain thing, like theories and prophecies about this character or that character or whatever.
We gotta do research, so it makes you kind of get into the weeds a little bit, maybe something that you haven't dove into in a while, because there's only so many times I can go to the Hal and Reed wiki. I mean, that's all I do, Matt. It's my homepage, and I go to Hal and Reed's wiki every day.
Done dedicated episodes just to Hal and Reed on the podcast, and I feel like I've still yet to even scratch the surface.
How everybody has their pet theory, like it better be resolved, and some of them are silly. For me, it's like, bro, if it's not Hal and Reed, like if Hal and Reed doesn't get solidified of what he has been doing and what he's done, that would be very disappointing for me. That's the only thing that needs to be resolved.
Well, now I've got a lot more because of that Greenman we saw. Our chronic men, just Greenmen. We kind of talked about that a little bit earlier, in the earlier tiers, but yeah, House of Dragon certainly given us a lot to play with, and it's a lot of fun. So
it is.
So with that, as always, I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening, and remember that winter is coming.